welcome to our 5th episode of A Writer's Journey, which is an exclusive live author meet session for the Ink and Quill Collective members. Our guest today is Prayaag Akbar. Prayaag Akbar is a novelist who needs no introduction. His works have covered themes of caste, class, politics, and recently AI. His debut novel, Leila, is a dystopian novel about a mother searching for her daughter in a futuristic world marred by extreme class divide. It has received numerous awards and has been adapted for a Netflix series. His latest is Mother India, which is right here. It is a contemporary novel about two young protagonists navigating the consequences of misusing an AI image generator in a very politically charged background, and super interesting. And he's currently a professor of literature at Prayaag University. Prayaag, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Rajiv. It's a pleasure to be here.
Prayaag, so in today's session, we'll briefly converse about 5 areas of your journey as a writer, which are ideation, first drafts, editing, publishing, and moving on to the next project. And it will follow a Q&A with our members. So, yeah.
Sure.
So we'll begin now. All right. First, with the ideation part, could you tell us about your experience working with the idea for Leila, particularly about your influences or familiarity of the subject or people or place, etc.?
So, Leila is a world, a dystopian kind of world that was characterized by deep caste divisions, as you said. And it was inspired by my time in both Delhi and Bombay. It carries the fictional city of that Shalini, my protagonist, lives in, is very much inspired by both those terrains. Delhi, especially the way, I don't know if any of the group is from Delhi, but Sujit. So how in Delhi we have these RWAs that are very, very powerful, and neighborhood associations that feel they can sort of put up barricades and put up gates and enclose what are actually common spaces. They're public commons, These are public thoroughfares, roads, and that are then kind of appropriated by these organizations. In Bombay, you had a lot of, I noticed there was even more so than Delhi, I noticed there was a big caste orientation around where you live, caste and religious orientation. So, you had Maratha areas, and you had Gujarati areas, and you had Muslim areas, of course, and Muslim buildings and things like that. And my wife and I had we weren't actually married at that time, but we had a lot of issues getting housing. We couldn't find a place to live. And it kind of brought home a lot of the social realities of India. So when people were very quick to describe it as a dystopia and things like that, but I wasn't, I didn't think of it as like that when I was writing the novel. I was just writing a kind of an accentuated version, perhaps, or exaggerated version of things that were already there around me. And I was actually telling one of my students, at the university I teach Kriya, they have this capstone project that literature students can do, creative capstone and all that. So one of the students wanted to do a dystopic fiction, and my advice to her was a short story, and my advice to her was, try and find the thing that makes you really angsty, find something that really bothers you about the world, whether it's, almost all stories come from some level of angst, some level of dissatisfaction. If you think of the classic examples of the dystopia, like Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, it was clearly a response to the Nazi book burning that was happening. He was basically talking about society that condones this kind of destruction of knowledge, and parallels with contemporary times, of course. But or take Atwood, Handmaid's Tale, which was inspired by an exaggerated version of what she saw as the patriarchal kind of control of the woman's reproductive process, and the fruits of that, and how she saw that kind of appropriation, and and extended that to such a beautiful and kind of, I mean, beautiful in the sense she managed to take that idea and really extend it into a whole world, which was created. If people are familiar with Handmaid's Tale, like, it's so beautifully thought out, that world. But it starts with that kernel is, the control of the woman's kind of, the patriarchal control of the woman's reproductive process. So I just think that that's where fiction comes from in many places, especially kind of dystopic fiction. I think with Mother India, it was a little different, but it was something that really bothered me about the world, and I didn't know how to express it in my journalism and in other forms of writing. I didn't know how to express how bothered I was by it. I think actually, I tried to write about it in journalism and things like that, but everyone was like, yeah, this is a social reality of India, and that's true. It is. It's something that carried over from our villages. You see it in the villages, you see it in urban spaces, and there's a lot of great caste scholarship around it. So.
That's great. I mean, it's good to understand, like, where your thought process is coming from while you're working on both the projects. I would also like to understand your choice of the perspective. Like, you use the first person POV for Leila, and out there you've used a mother as your prime character. I'd like to understand your process getting into that character, considering that you're getting into the mind of a different gender and addressing their thoughts, their wants, and that too in a very realistic way.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it was, that you think it was realistic. It was a big struggle, actually. I did something very foolish, I think, now in retrospect, but like when I was about 28, I decided to write in the voice of a 43-year-old woman, and I was a 28-year-old male, and I was like, oh, let me write in this voice. And then when I was 42, I mean, when I started writing this book, I was about 38 or something, and I'm 42 now, and I was writing in the voice of this 20-year-old, 21-year-old man and 21-year-old woman. So, I mean, in retrospect, these are very painful decisions, because I had to spend a lot of extra time trying to understand how to capture the voice, capture specifics about that time. I remember with Shalini, who's my protagonist in Leila, it was particularly difficult because I was writing as a mother and things like that, and I really wanted to capture the interiority of what it would be like to lose a child. I didn't have a child at the time. Like, that was the other crazy thing that I tried to do. And now that I have a child, I can almost not read that book. I find it very difficult to read that book because it's very dark. She loses her child on her. She loses Leila on the third birthday party. So it's like, it's a really sad story, actually. And I don't know if I'd been able to write it if I had a child of my own at that time. So that's
all right. So, but in Mother India, you use like a omniscient third-person POV, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Most part of it, yeah.
I'm not omniscient, but yeah, it's like more limited. It's from the perspective of Mayank and Nisha itself. So
yeah,
I can really zoom out from what they experience. So it's limited third person.
Yeah, but then it was very interesting how you sometimes melted into the character. Particularly, one of the examples that I would like to state was when you're referring to the other character, particularly the boss or mother, when you use the title like Mama, or what name Mayank would actually have in his head, you use that. So how do you reach to those? How do you decide those junctions where you can get into the character's mind and just use that word instead of saying that his mother or his boss?
It's from my perspective now, the third person narration has become so kind of, it's moved a lot from that universal narrator, right? The kind of, so if everyone's familiar with all these terms, and I can continue.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead. Yeah.
The omniscient kind of narrator is that, the kind of God-like figure, right? They know everything that happens in that universe. And whereas what I did with the limited third person was, you only see the world from Mayank and Nisha's perspective. So their thoughts, their interiority, their experience of this world. It's very much Nisha's kind of, what her path through this world is very much what she can see, right? She doesn't know what Siddharth is thinking, for instance. She really wants to know what Siddharth is thinking, but she doesn't know what Siddharth is thinking. So if you stay with that, then you can stay with, their the particular terms. So it's actually a really interesting point that you brought up, because my editor at HarperCollins wanted to standardize all the references to Kashyap, the YouTuber. And I was like, no, there are times when he really respects him and he wants to call him Vikramji. And there's times when he's or Kashyapji, and there's times when he's like, oh, God, that guy's like a pompous blowhard, he referred to him as Kashyap or even something else, Taklu or whatever he calls him, Baldi or whatever he calls him at one point. So it's, I think that also kind of solidifies the narrative work, right? It reminds you that you're inside someone else's mind and thoughts, and like it does it in a very precise and kind of quick way. So I think I got that from writers like Kutsi, J.M. Kutsi. He's very good at that. Just staying very much so closely tuned in to that person's worldview. I don't know if you read a book called Diary of a Bad Year. It's a really good Kutsi, but it starts with this academic. It's about an academic, and it starts with his gaze at. He's in his laundry room of his building, and he's looking at this young woman, and it's just the way he captures that old man looking at the young woman. Immediately you're in, it's this leery / academically interested perspective and things like that, and it just captures that that dynamic really well. So you try and learn from others, of course, like how well they do certain things, and try and capture that.
All right. Awesome. And now while we're talking about this character, the other interesting aspect was building flawed characters or flawed personalities in like your protagonist, right? So this exercise of character development and giving flaws, etc., and detailing them out. Do you do that at the first draft stage, or you just keep building it as you go along?
My process is kind of like really time intensive. Like I wish it wasn't, and I really am trying to address these kind of flaws in my way of working, because what I do is I write a draft, and then I write another draft, and I don't, I haven't probably the characters and I get really frustrated by the time I'm on my third draft, and I'm like. I talk my agent, and she's my first editor. She's an amazing editor. She actually used to be an editor before she became an agent. She's a fantastic editor. And so she's like my first line of kind of editing, And when I, by the third draft, I'm like, what is happening? Like, I'm not getting to these characters and all. And the way she described it is that you're actually getting to know them over the course of the drafting, over that first draft and the second draft, you found out things about them that you didn't have when you started. Now, so it definitely happened with Mayank. I can give you concrete examples. If everyone's read the book, as with Mayank, I knew, say, I'll give you an example. Like I knew he didn't have his father. He was raised by his mother, I knew that about him. But I didn't know how he lost his father. I didn't know how to make it material to the story, if you understand what I mean. How do I make it matter in the story? The fact of losing the father is one thing, but how do I make it matter in the story in a real way, as opposed to just the loss of the father? First, I just had the loss of the father, which is its own basket of, things that it leaves you with. And I had something about Mayank, I knew that Mayank had that, but how, the way I could tie it into the larger story, or I know Sukhjit is nodding, that's I know you've read it. It's like that only came in the third draft, so there are things that you come to you and things that don't, and you have to keep beating you keep beating at it, and then hopefully something emerges.
Yeah, and one of the style that I noticed in yours writing while reading the book, Mother India, was that you use a lot of physical references when you introduce the character, right?
So I suppose it's you put in the things you notice about other people, right? Like you draw things from certain people and put them into your characters, And you know, I think there are there are things that I notice, about people's faces, perhaps, or people's physicality, as you're saying, and I find that a good way to kind of give you a sense of who the person is. I think with Kashyap, I made him this kind of like he's kind of a bodybuilder also. Like he's a small, power packed little guy, and he's got this. And for me, that just captured something about who he was in this kind of, and surrounding this right wing rhetoric, and it just seemed to me that that would fit, that body type would fit like someone who's like really angry on the internet. I don't know why. I just thought of it.
Yeah. In fact, the thing was that the way you chose to describe his dressing sense as well, to kind of give him a bit more depth in character, or even when you're talking about like the main character Mayank, right? How he developed his muscles. It was because of his profession and all. Like the way you describe it, I found a lot of interesting references, which kind of like gave a different dimension to the character. My question was purely to understand whether it is some sort of like a style that you
I
personally
don't
follow.
think it's a style I follow. I think it's just a matter of noticing. What do we notice, and what do we put into our characters? Like I remember when I first wrote Leila, my first draft of Leila. Again, the same editor. She made a point. She said, she's like, I didn't smell anything the whole novel, and I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, there was no sense of. I never got an olfactory like illusion. And the thing is that my sense of smell is not very good. Like it's not very sharp. I don't smell that well. Like it's not that it's deficient, but like I don't like pick up on very subtle fragrances or anything like that. So naturally, I mean, it was just my worldview was kind of limited in that sense. And then I had to kind of train myself. It's like, okay, if you want to be a writer, you have to not just listen to sound and sight, but also smell. Like, so I've literally been thinking a lot about like how fragrances work, and bad smells and good smells, and it's in one of the best lessons I got about best lines I read somewhere in something was that a writer should evoke all five senses or four senses or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? You need to basically recreate when you recreate a moment. See if it's the suitable thing. If it's just like if it's when Mayank and his mother are towards the end on Diwali night are like kind of lighting, they're praying in front of the small murti in their house. That for me, that's a moment where smell is triggered. That's the agarbatti has a sharp smell. Prayers usually, they've got some kind of thing wafting around. Some incense is burning, something else is burning, and it's for me that was a moment that required smell. And so to try and find what suits that moment, Diwali night when everything is like has that carbolic air, the air is roasted, and it's so there are moments when I suppose it's appropriate to use smell, moments when it's appropriate to use sight. If they're in front of a beautiful sunset, like try and recreate that the majesty of that.
My next question at the first draft stage would be, how do you handle the blank page, the first blank page? How do you start with that? You have the idea, you have everything ready. Now you need to start jotting the entire story, right? How do you, what's your mindset at that point?
So, as I said, like there's this writer, you guys know Zadie Smith, the British novelist, like she wrote White Teeth, and she writes short stories, actually. I love her short stories. And you can find them on the New Yorker website. There's a couple of amazing ones. I teach one. And she has this essay. I forget what it's called, but it was and she says that there are two types of writers. She's like, there's a writer who has a first sentence who a sentence appears to them, and then the story appears, and then they start writing the story, and then they rework and do all of that. Of course that happens, but there is the other type of writer is a planner who plans out everything and then gets to work. And she was like, I'm the first sentence. She was talking about herself, and she said, I'm the first person. A first sentence kind of right. I get a first sentence, and then everything sort of flows from there. Um, I didn't. I with this book, it was definitely like that. Actually, even with Leila, I had the first sentence first, which was, Shalini looking for her, the search for the dog. It got modified. It was a little different, but with this book, certainly I had the first sentence. Um, with the next, which I'm dealing with the blank page. I'm at the blank page stage right now. Like it's very much. I mean, I would say it's the opposite. Like I've done a lot more planning this time around, and the first sentence doesn't matter so much. I could change it later. It's not like this defining sentence. Whereas for me, the first sentence of the second book, Mother India, was like, it it actually had my it was all one flow. I broke it up into three by the end of it, but it was one flowing thing, and it was, for me, you learned a lot about Mayank by the end of that first sentence. I wanted to transmit a lot by that first sentence. And with this one, I just think that there's no one way of going about it. You just have to keep trying and plugging away at it. And if your idea is good and you've thought about it well, then just get to writing. Like, try and get it. Try and find. Well, I think what happens is we kind of dilly dally before getting to the story. We feel like we should tell our readers a lot about the characters before the real stuff happens and things like that. And I just find increasingly in contemporary fiction, but if you read writers like Steinbeck and all these guys, like they were at it 60 years ago, 70 years ago, whenever they were writing, the speed of information is really fast. Or John Berger's another one. The speed of information is really fast, and you got to see that. Start your story where, like, I think it is E.M. Foster who said, like, start your story where at the point where things start to go wrong. So once if your characters are all in their perfectly placid places, then the story hasn't started. You're just doing background stuff. So start where there is something to start with, where an oral storyteller would start. An oral storyteller doesn't. I think it's an unforgiving medium, and you see it now on YouTube and things like that. You have to capture attention right away. You have to grab people's attention right away. And the way oral storytellers did it was, not wasting anyone's time. And I think just see where your characters are and what's the perfect place to start them in, so that things are already, there's a prison of something.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask the question about structure. How do you use structure in your novels? And do you have any references that we could all refer to?
I mean, so there's no one template, right, for a novel. Like, it's not, all novels have different structures. What you need to, so structure is crucial. Like, there are people who say structure is the most important thing about a novel. I don't know how that could be, but it is. Like, I did not understand how to write Mother India. I wrote 2 drafts, and it was only when I came to this final structure of the shorter story and how the narratives don't overlap, but kind of intertwine. Once I understood, like, I saw it visually as a kind of like a vertical axis, and then something going like this, and then something starting almost like a braid of hair. So the story where it starts, where my young story starts, is here, and then it goes to here, but Nisha's story starts here and goes to here. And once I understood that visually, once I just understood that was what I was doing, and it wasn't like this neatly moving narrative like this, it became a lot easier. And then I found ways to create that kind of, I can't give away more about the novel, but it was one of the things that I learned. And so with structure, it's about understanding the right structure for your next story. Like, I can't use the same structure I use with Mother India in my next novel, right? So the best thing to do, I would advise, is try and find a novel like the novel you're trying to write, right? If you're writing a murder mystery, try and find a murder mystery that you really like, that, see how they do it. Like, I mean, I would say, like, Agatha Christie is a good place. If you're writing this kind of cozy murder mystery, with a quirky detective, then Agatha Christie is a good place to start. If you're writing literary fiction, literary fiction is probably the toughest because like the structures range, there's no template at all with literary fiction. The structures range all over the place. But with romance novels or murder fiction, thrillers, it's easier because uh, you have all these great examples of these books that are really, really kind of gripping, And uh, I mean, if you guys have any examples, if someone could give me an example of a story they're trying to write, I could give you an example of, of a structure that might be suitable.
Anybody would like to pick up a story for the structure advice?
I can talk about the draft I'm trying to write, and maybe if there is a reference we can discuss.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Um, it's I'm a lot into running, so I'm writing about um, marathoner, ultra runner who does a lot of intercity runs, and her journey from nobody to holding several world records. So there is a interviewer. It's mostly me. It's based on me, and this interviewer goes on one mission with this ultra runner, and she's just basically documenting various stages of that running mission in between cities, and also kind of relating her life's experience. She gave up running due to some reasons few years ago, and there is a hunger to get back into it, and how to accomplish her own dreams and so on. So this is one thing, and I was not able to think of a proper reference for this.
This, I mean, I'm guessing that this would fall under kind of, it's a more literary idea, right? You're actually talking about how characters learn from each other, how they play
Yeah.
off each other. Two people from different walks of life coming together and kind of trying to, So the interviewer is like, she's a journalist, I'm guessing. Is it someone
No,
who's doing it for
she's
media?
an author. She's an author. She's researching for her book and doing this research with this runner on her mission.
I mean, you can look for novels with writer protagonists. So one would be On the Road by Jack Kerouac, with this strong writer voice and this buddy who he's learning from and kind of very disgusted with also, like Neil Cassidy. So that's a kind of it has this dynamic. Of course, that novel goes into various social commentaries and it's also an exploration of a certain period of time in American history, and an artistic kind of. So you have to see how. I mean, I think that would actually be a great novel to use as a template, like, and not as a template, like just to use as a kind of, just when I say look at it and see what Kerouac achieved, right? Which is that he creates the relationship between the two people. That's at the heart of the book. That's what, when I read the book, say when it comes to if you finish the book, you publish it, it's out in the market, and I get a chance to read this book, I would want to read. I mean, I like to run, but like I'm not obsessed with running. Like, I'm not an ultra runner or anything like that, right? So I will not read the book purely to understand the fundamentals of running. I actually want to know about these people and the how these two people interact and what they get out of each other. So I'm not reading it as a kind of guide into running, right? And so you want to be able to you want to be able to kind of understand that what is actually what thrills us about the novels we like. When you read that novel, you read On the Road, or you read another novel with a strong writer protagonist, like what is it that you actually find thrilling? Is it the descriptions of jazz? Like, Jack, that book is full of descriptions of jazz and things like that. And like, that stuff is kind of dated now. Like it's not, like, but what remains with me maybe 15 years after I read the book or whatever, 20 years after I read the book, is that the relationship between the narrator and Neil Cassidy, and how he's kind of looking at him admiringly, but also in this cynical way. And, it's so, you have to, yeah, you have to try and find the right example. I'd also recommend, if you're writing the book about running, there's a book by this writer called Sohini Chattopadhyay, which came out recently, How to Be.
Yeah, the one.
The,
Yeah.
the day I became a runner.
Yes.
Sorry,
They-
yeah, sorry. But it's very good, and it's just good on capturing the rhythms of the run and what it takes, and all that effort, and it'll give you good fertile material for your story.
Okay.
All right. So yeah,
Thank you.
so we'll move on next to the publishing sector. So you have had experience publishing both in India and abroad. So tell us about the experience when you're comparing both.
Publishing in the UK was fantastic. It was like a lifelong dream. So I was really happy. Just it was a Faber and Faber's like a really historic publishing house. It was a dream come true, really. I wasn't, I didn't ever expect it. I don't think, when I was writing the novel, because it's a very India-focused novel. This is my second novel is too. So it was a great experience. It's a little, it's not like, it wasn't like any kind of tearaway success abroad. It did very middling numbers, but it found a few readers, and I was really happy about that. I have like, there was this foreign correspondent from who used to work in Delhi when I was a journalist, and she went back to America, and she found my book in some Midwestern store, like in the middle of nowhere, where she was visiting her mother. She found my novel there, and I was like, she sent me a photograph, and I was so thrilled. It was like, what is my work doing in that little town? But it's nice. Those are the joys you get out of it. There's not like it's not like a lot of money or anything. The literary fiction, especially, the market has just collapsed. So you can't expect, like big bucks like the Arundhati Roy days or anything. Those days seem to have passed. I mean, I'm sure some people get it, but I didn't. It's a dream. It would be lovely to have like a massive contract, a massive dollar contract or whatever, or a massive pound contract. But that's not, honestly, I've realized that after my second book, that's not what keeps me writing. Like, I'm writing because I love it, and I don't, I want to do it, and I have the opportunity to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it. So, it's like, I still have a job, right? I have to teach, and, I do whatever I can to like, to make the ends meet, and like, things like that. But because it's very difficult to make a living just from writing, like, it's almost impossible. I mean, if you guys have a little time, I'll tell you, like, I got nominated for this prize for Leila, and the guy who's giving the award was this big British writer called Sebastian Fox. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. He's this big, like really well-known literary fiction writer. And I was so excited because like my book has been quite a success, and I was like, I'm going to quit journalism. I was about to quit journalism. I was about to quit my job as a journalist. I was like, I'm done now. I can just be like a writer now, finally. And I went to this thing, and he gave a speech at the award ceremony. I didn't win the award, first of all, but secondly, like, he gave a speech at the award ceremony, and he was like, I really enjoyed your books. The three of us who were shortlisted, or four of us, and he's like, I really enjoyed your books, but please get some kind of job, as opposed, just don't try and make a living out of writing. I was like, what? Like, you're like this super successful writer, and he's like, I've been teaching at University College London throughout my writing thing, and it's just impossible because it takes so long to write about, like 5 years or whatever, and like then. Like, and it was such sound advice, like when he told me that, and I was humbling because like, I was like, this man already has this success, like he doesn't, if he's saying that, then I have to heed him, like I can't be like living this life, like trying to create or imagining I could live a life like just on the strength of my writing alone. So that was a learning moment for me. No, Samanya, like your experience could be very different from mine. So it's just write books that a lot of people want to read, happy books or something like that. I mean,
So,
there's these guys like self-help books. Chetan Bhagat is writing self-help. There's a lot of ways to make money from books, but I just don't know how to do it myself.
well, yeah, but Parag, we do love what you're writing currently. So, like, yeah, always keep doing that. So we'll move on to the Q&A section from our members. We have a short amount of time, so we'll try to cover as much as we can. First question is by Ashni. She asked, what was your process of getting an agent and a publisher? Could you walk us through your journey? Did you connect with your agent through introductions or cold emails?
What happened was, I worked for quite a few years as a journalist before, like 6 or 7 years as a journalist. No, more than that. Before I wrote to my agent. So I think she had seen a couple of my bylines. And what happened was I had 3 chapters written of Leila. What I knew was going to be Leila, but the chapters were very unformed and all of that. But like, I had these chapters, and so there was an editor of Caravan at that time. Caravan magazine, basically, he was a senior editor there, and he knew her, my agent. So I asked him, and he was like, "Oh, I can put you in touch with this person then." So I basically wrote to her with 3 chapters, and she read them. It took her like I'd actually given up hope that she was going to reply to me because I didn't hear from her for like 2 months. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, this person's not interested in my work. And I was like, I was kind of like telling this guy, Jonathan, the editor, I was like, dude, she didn't even reply. Like, what is this and all? And where you and he was like, I can't do anything. If she doesn't like it, there's nothing I can do. So she got back to me 2 months later, and she was like, you have something here. If you want to go and write, like, you should go ahead and write. And I took that as a sign to like be able to write. And I never signed any like formal document with her or anything like that. We just kept it at that relationship. She was like, I would send her stuff from time to time, like once a year, like every year or something. I think.
All right.
She'll give me feedback.
So our next question is from Sonia Indigo. She asks, how much time did it take from starting to write a book until you finished the creative part? And how much time it took from the editing process until the publication of the book?
So it's, again, very variable. With Leila, it was about 5 years, actually, because I made a lot of missteps with that. I didn't know what I was doing, actually. I was just writing and understanding what I could write, how I could write. So again, it was nice that I was working in journalism. I was doing it also like in this kind of haphazard way where I wrote a lot of it in Costa Coffee in GK2 market, which is next to my office. And I would just go there and sit there and have one coffee. And they would I would sit there until they close or whatever. And I think that's how I wrote the first draft. And then I realized that, it's not a great time to write. It's not a great way to write. And so, and now I try and make it the priority hours of my day. Like, it's like the first thing I do always is the writing.
All right. Kanika asks, how would you define literary fiction in India?
Dying. Literary fiction is it's probably too many writers and not enough readers. I think that's the it's hard because there's not a lot of very good literary fiction coming out of India in the last few years. Like, we've had some amazing writers, but that moment when we had like this like 5 or 6 or 7 like world-class writers, like Arundhati Roy and Ghosh and Rushdie, of course, and like all these other people, and it just felt like we had this, Rohinton Mystery was writing, and all these fantastic writers, and that was when I was growing up, like the 90s and like 2000s and like 80s and 90s, and like all these guys were just like global. I mean, Naipaul, but Naipaul's not Indian, but like they were doing this kind of global names, and it's kind of really not at that high point anymore. Indian fiction, I think we've had a lot of I think publishers have really deviated away from supporting literary fiction. There's no, like, yeah, there was a time I was talking to G. Tile about this. He did my the Bangalore kind of discussion in for Mother India, and we went out and had a meal after that. And I was talking to him, and he said, he's like, back in the day, like the literary fiction was not meant to be like cover, like like make money or anything like that. Publishers wanted literary fiction because they wanted to publish good books, and the commercial fiction kind of paid for that. And the kind of commercial fiction funded the literary arc, and so everyone knew, like, you needed like a big publisher in the UK would publish Jeffrey Archer, but would also be able to publish, like, whoever else, Hanif Qureshi or whoever, like, but because Jeffrey Archer was funding, like, in some way, like not funding, but like in some way helping to pay for the kind of marquee authors. But now I think Indian publishers are just like, we don't really need to support these guys. Like, why should we subsidize them? So it's getting tougher. Like, I feel like a lot of writers now are feeling very dispirited because the advances have kind of fallen away, and people spend years writing a book. I know last year so many people wrote good books, like good writers, who just hardly getting in advance. Like, what are you supposed to do then? What are you doing it for? Like, like it is a difficult moment. But hopefully, like I do find encouragement in the fact that my students all read a lot. I think that I think in that age group there seem to be a lot of readers, people coming back to reading. I see it in my son's school also. My son's only 6 years old, but like his older classmates, like my friends' kids who are older, like they'll have their kids all read books, and they read physical books as opposed to Kindles and all of that. And for me, that's a really wonderful thing, because it shows that people are using books as a kind of digital, to stay out of the digital kind of world or realm or whatever. And so it's encouraging that people are reading. Maybe this is just a bad moment and things will recover, return.
Well, that sounds hopeful. But yeah, next question is from Lee Nolan. Do you consciously balance plot-driven elements with character-driven storytelling in your fiction, or do you favor one aspect over the other?
Well, I think for me, that's a great question, by the way. Nolan. I think the question is for me, what happens is that I try and understand about the character as much as I can, and then the plot emerges from that. In my new in the story I'm working on right now, like I have these kind of relationships in this family, extended family, and I have these relationships, and that is giving me the kind of ideas for what should happen in the story. Like how they, and again, it depends on the kind of story you're trying to write. But for me, in this new story, it's very much maybe character leading plot, because the who they are. I think that's really important. Like I think we don't stress that enough, and I tell my students this all the time. But if you take the most important thing in fiction is like character. People are reading fiction to understand about another life, whatever that life is. Like I honestly, I can read about an ultra runner. I can read about like someone in America on a Greyhound bus. I can read about I can read about anything. It doesn't matter. But you have to try and create that to show me that actual life. Show me that person's life in its in reality. And once you have that, once you show me that, I'm hooked. And that's what keeps us in story, because we don't, what happens in a story, like you can think of any story actually, like I give my students the example of Harry Potter, because everyone knows Harry Potter, and it's like, do you remember like the small details of like how Hermione like defeated, this chap or whatever? Like no one remembers that stuff. We remember how Harry changed over the novel, how, like at one point he was, how his character grows and how his character develops and how Hermione develops and how Ron develops, and like how we want to grow with them in that sense. That's the charm of those books. And It's not like how she defeats Voldemort or whatever, these things. So it's really very much characters at the heart of narrative fiction. If you're writing a film or something like that, it's a different ballgame. But if you're writing like fiction, narrative fiction, literary fiction, it's character, like it's people. We want to know about people. I really think that, and I try and get this into my students. I tell my students this, and some of them get it, and some of them don't. But I really think it's at the heart of fiction. Thank you. No, great question.
Okay, moving to the next question by Sumanya. Do you lose sight of your POV while writing? How do you deal with it, especially if the renegade POV is really good?
You can't. I mean, you have to come back. Like it's a problem because I got it. I got some criticism for it in Mother India, also in the Indian Express. But like they there was at one point maybe where I was a little lax with it, and but I honestly felt that I wasn't. My editor brought it up, and I felt I wasn't. I felt that my character could have those thoughts at that moment. It was unfair to think that only sort of university educated people can think about things like Lady Liberty and things like that. But it is a difficult thing, and you need, the best thing is to have someone who reads, whose opinion you trust. Everyone needs an outside reader, right? Everyone needs an outside set of eyes, because we don't see the flaws in our own work. It's very difficult. You read and the thing about showing it to someone whose opinion you don't trust is you just won't be able to internalize it. Even with my agent, I've been working with her now for more than 10 years. When she first sends me her edit, I'm like, God, she's being too harsh, or she's vindictive, or she's doing this for some reason. She wants to make me spend another year writing it. She doesn't know, like you have all these horrible thoughts in your head and you're blaming the other person and so it takes me like a week or 2 weeks, or, I sit with it and I kind of read her emails and I read her thoughts, and then I don't look at the work for a bit, and I try to think about something else, and then I try and in that time, like her message sinks in. I internalize what she's trying to say, and then I understand that it's not coming from a bad place. It's actually coming from a really useful place, and this is someone I trust, whose opinion I trust. So it takes time, because it's your work is so precious to you. Like it's your work. It's every word is thought about and considered and put in, and yet we can't see ourselves that it's flawed, and and things like that. So it's a difficult process, but it's not only for narrative voice, it's for all sorts of things that a good editor helps you. But especially, I mean, Shruti catches me like riffing and things, like just going off on my own like kind of intellect, whatever, like meandering, and she's like, there is no way my uncle's thinking this, or Shalini's thinking this. She's just put a line through it. It's hurtful, but it helps.
Yep. So we have another interesting question coming up. It's by Subjit. Your writing deals with subjects which can be termed a bit sensitive in today's times. How much, if any, self-censoring happens in your drafts or revisions, and how much by the editors?
I'll give credit to where credit's due. I haven't got any kind of censorship from any publishing houses. I think that is a remarkable thing. I always thought I would get something, and it's never been out of fear of political sort of political kind of what is it, like recriminations. It's what has happened is, so I think I have two advantages there. One is that I write in English. I don't write in Hindi, and I don't write in another language. If I was writing in Malayalam or Telugu or Tamil, whatever, Punjabi, like you're talking to a much wider audience. I have to admit, like your readership is vast. Like your book goes out, and it's just a bigger audience. Like there's many more Hindi readers than the English readers today, and especially for literary fiction and things like that. So it's I mean, people would read really, really good Hindi poets and Hindi storytelling, and whereas they'll have like a Hindi literary fiction writer will have 1 million readers, and English will have like 10,000 if they're very successful, or 20,000 if they're successful. So there's no real comparison. I think that makes you a lot safer. Like I think the governments would pay more attention if you were speaking to like hundreds of thousands of people, like so that's like some writers are. Um, so I got when the show came out was when the Netflix show came out was when I got the kind of the political sort of I was just hearing all sorts of stuff, and the internet just went crazy. Like, I'd left Twitter. I was like, I don't need to be around on Twitter. Like, people just abusing me all the time. I was like, I would go on Twitter and it's like just lines of messages like, oh, you bastard this, and I was like, oh, why am I out here? Like, why am I just getting shouted at every day? Like, I can get this at home. So I just didn't. I just quit Twitter at that time. It just didn't seem right to me to be on that space, and like. Because like it was clearly something that was bothering some IT cell somewhere, like so they just got into gear, and this every day was like tweet after tweet after tweet. And so, but I've never got that with my fiction. And honestly, with Simon and Schuster, with the first book, HarperCollins, the second book, nothing, which is not to say that Indian publishing is an ideal place. Like it happens a lot in nonfiction, especially people writing histories of Hindutva right now, or histories. It used to happen with histories of the Congress, like it is a problem in Indian publishing, but luckily not with fiction.
All right. So we just have 2 minutes left. I think I can take just one more question, if it's okay. It's by Nandita. She asks, can you elaborate on writing what you don't know? Since you mentioned writing as a 43-year-old woman while not being one, what is it like in contrast to writing what you know?
I mean, I don't think I'm going to write a story. Like a lot of writers write that kind of, the auto fiction is called nowadays. Like there's a great writer in America called Ben Lerner. It's basically like this kind of fiction that where the narrator is almost a proxy for the writer himself. He's like it carries the writer's thoughts, and he's invariably a writer himself, and he's kind of going through Brooklyn or going through wherever he is, and this kind of high-minded narrative. Very literary narrative. It's not my style. I don't think I would write a book like that where I would so closely resemble the narrator. Maybe I'm not so not ready for that. But with a lot of I mean, what was the exact question? Sorry, I went.
No, it was about when you write about a character, or write from a mindset of a character which you have no relation to, or you are not that character. Say, for example, this 43-year-old woman, right? So in contrast to what is it like writing such characters in contrast to something that you already know?
You always have to get inside that character, right? You have always, whoever it is, even if the character resembles yourself, unless you're writing literally about yourself. You have to, it's always putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And even when your main protagonist is very closely like yourself, there are other people in this world that they're interacting with, and you have to write, you have to think about them in the fullness of their experience, So the act of writing fiction requires the creative leap. It requires it demands of us to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And that's why I think writers of fiction, I mean, if you can put yourself in another person's experience, try and think of their experience. I mean, the first novel, you're talking about the fact that it's like a 43-year-old woman, but it's also about a woman who's living in a society that's fallen apart. So you have to imagine that part too. And it's not just the fact of her being a woman, but being a woman who's lost her husband, and being a woman who's lost a child, and being a woman who's living in this society that's disintegrated, and she used to be at the top and she's gone to the bottom. Like these are all experiences I've not had. But that's what fiction is. We have to imagine that. And we have to imagine ourselves. That's why it's painful, to write sometimes, like, because you have to kind of like really try and experience that pain. I remember like with my uncle, sometimes when you're writing about a character and they've lost a parent, or something like that. I spoke to friends who'd lost parents. At an early age, I tried to understand how their lives were altered. And like I think what happens is, I spoke to a friend of mine who I was in school with who lost a parent at an early age, and like it was, it's like I remember at an early age feeling empathetic towards this boy. Like I was like, we were all aware that he'd lost his mother, but the thing was that you don't understand what it's like from that perspective, right? Until you try and speak to them and understand that. So it's like you do your research and you try and create a kind of emotional affinity, I suppose. Like, you try and create a connection with your own experience and their experience, and try and remember, how, I'm sorry, I'm sounding a little like abstract or vague, but like, I just think that it's a very difficult thing what you're asking me about. But like, it's how do you try and create a moment of affinity with the character, I suppose, like this moment of whoever this character is, whatever their experience, what is it that what is there in your experience that's like that? I'll give you one example, okay, and then I'll be done. Sorry. It's just a great question. So it's like, so with Leila, I had this scene where the mother was, she'd already lost her daughter when you meet her. And she only has the memories of the first 3 years of this girl's life. And so I was at a mall in Delhi, and I saw this mother, put her child on one of those trains, and the train goes around on the track, like the mall, whatever track. And so the mother put the child in the front, and this child was so excited, and then about halfway through, the child got a little frightened, and the mother was a little unnerved herself. It was just a very human moment between a mother and a child. And I thought, oh, I can use this in my work, because so I wrote that scene in the book. I just put that scene into the book of the mother looking at the child and feeling the child is lost, and then the child is obviously coming back to her, and there's that relief. But that's just that moment, and for me, that was an echo of what she goes through in a much larger thing later, and so I just thought of that.
Yep, that was very beautifully stated. Thank you so much, Prayaag. One last thing though, when do we expect your next book?
It's not, I wouldn't know, man. I thought I was about to be done. I'm way too optimistic, so.
All right. So here's an invitation from IQC. If you ever need company to write, we are all here. We all write at 7 a.m., 9 a.m. You just pick the time,
really?
and we are all around.
You guys
So
all
we have writing sprints every day, and everybody just joins, just talks for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and then we write for an hour in silence and stuff like that.
Wow, amazing. I mean, it's just an amazing initiative. It's really nice to meet you all, and just how you guys go about it. I didn't realize you're all working in your fiction together. It's really wonderful to support each other like this also. Right?
Yeah,
writers are not friendly with each other usually, so it's great.
And the thing is that our members are really, really very collaborative that way, and we are actually coming up with our magazine. We just closed our submissions, and we'll soon be launching our magazine. We'll share our link when it's up and running.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I'm on your Instagram, and also I'm looking forward to seeing you guys work. Really.
Absolutely. This is great. This is great.
So yeah, wonderful session. I really enjoyed the questions. I can tell I was talking to writers. After the first question, I was like, oh, I'm actually talking to writers. I didn't realize exactly what you guys are really. It was a wonderful session because I got a lot out of it myself. Just to think about my own work in this way and all of that it's really nice. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yep. Also, before we close the session, we would like to mention once again that this is our first session where we are in collaboration with Ukiyo, a cute bookstore in Manipur. We have collaborated together to procure signed copies from Prayaag. And anybody who's interested, we have the poll running in our group. You can add yourself there, and we'll send out the order form soon.
If you could read Mother India, that would be great. I would be really grateful.
Awesome.
As we get. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck with your next project, Prayaag, and talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.